Cop insults black woman at the security check, unaware her husband owns the airline. A glint of fury flashes across Officer Tanner's eyes as he stares down at the petite black woman standing nervously by the security conveyor belt. She clenches her fists, pulses racing, while the crowd around them buzzes with tension like a swarm of angry bees. His tone cuts through the airport's bustling ambiance, harsh, unyielding, and laced with arrogance. Suddenly her phone buzzes in her trembling hand. She hesitates, glancing at the screen displaying her husband's name. He owns the entire airline, though the officer has no clue. Before she can answer, Officer Tanner steps forward. His next words will change everything. Officer Tanner had never been known for his gentle demeanor. Rumor among airport staff was that he relished any moment he could wield his power to intimidate passengers, especially those he judged to be lesser. Working security detail at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, he'd come across thousands of travelers every week. But this Wednesday morning would prove different. The sun was still low in the sky, and the corridor leading to the security checkpoint was illuminated by beams of glowing light. People filed in quietly, some yawning from early flights, others clutching Starbucks cups to keep warm against the crisp autumn air. A typical day, or so it seemed. At first, the line proceeded smoothly. Families wrestling strollers, business travelers tapping away at laptops, couples whispering about upcoming vacations. Then, strolling in with a kind of graceful composure, came a woman dressed in a simple yet elegant burgundy suit. Her name was Adriana Carter. She carried herself with quiet confidence despite the swirl of travelers around her. Maybe it was her composed posture or the determination in her eyes. There was something about her that commanded respect. Adriana placed her carry-on bag on the X-ray belt, moving with practiced efficiency. She traveled often, but not in a flashy way. She had learned to keep a low profile. While her husband was the majority shareholder and CEO of Monarch Airlines, a name that carried immense weight in the aviation industry, Adriana had made a conscious decision to avoid the limelight. As far as the public was concerned, she was just another passenger. The fact that her husband, Gregory Carter, owned the airline was a secret she guarded fiercely. The anonymity felt liberating. She removed her shoes and placed them in a gray bin, then took off her blazer to place on top. The routine was second nature, but she felt a slight quiver in the air, an intangible tension, when she spotted Officer Tanner standing at the metal detector. He was tall, with broad shoulders and steely eyes, his uniform meticulously pressed. His gaze flicked over her, pausing. An uneasy feeling settled in Adriana's stomach. All it took was one beep from the metal detector to set everything in motion. Adriana glanced down in confusion. She'd removed all her jewelry, no belts, no watch, not even small earrings. She stepped back through, but the machine beeped again. A sense of confusion spread across her face. Immediately, Officer Tanner barked an order. "Step aside, ma'am, over here." His voice cut through the air like a blade. Adriana, trying to remain calm, looked around for help or an explanation. Before she could speak, Tanner motioned for a pat-down. His words were clipped and curt. "Arms out," he commanded. While most travelers would find this just an inconvenience, the look of scorn in Tanner's eyes unsettled Adriana. She opened her arms. A female officer approached to conduct a pat-down. The moment her fingers touched Adriana's arms, Adriana could feel the burn of stares from other passengers. The beep from the metal detector wasn't unusual, but the hostility in Tanner's posture suggested something else entirely. When the pat-down revealed nothing suspicious, the female officer stepped back and shrugged, passing the information to Tanner. Instead of nodding and letting Adriana move on, his jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to Adriana's hair, neatly styled in micro braids pinned back in a low bun, and a contemptuous smile tugged at his lips. He cleared his throat, addressing Adriana in a tone that left no room for doubt. "You people are always trying to smuggle something. Let's see what you've got hidden. Open your bags." Adriana's cheeks flushed with a mix of indignation and dread. The words "you people" stung like a slap in the face. For a moment, she contemplated revealing her identity. The protective instinct inside her flared. Should she mention Gregory? Yet she hesitated, deciding to remain composed. Causing a scene at a crowded airport was the last thing she wanted. Passengers behind Adriana in line began to grow uneasy, some stepping forward, some whispering among themselves. A middle-aged businessman in a gray suit shot Adriana a sympathetic look. Another woman with a small child looked worried and pulled her child closer. It was as if they all sensed something was off about this officer's conduct. Adriana unzipped her carry-on, revealing neatly folded clothes, a laptop, and a small toiletry kit. She placed them on the table for a search. Tanner rummaged through her belongings, roughly lifting items as if expecting to find contraband hidden beneath the compartments. He even shook out a pair of socks, letting them fall to the floor like fallen leaves. Adriana bit her lip, but she refused to let tears fill her eyes. A wave of humiliation washed over her. This was no longer just standard security procedure. It was something far more sinister. The beep of her cell phone interrupted the tension. Adriana glanced down. It was Gregory calling. Though she ached to answer, to let him know what was happening, she declined the call. Not here, not now. The officer glared at her. "No phones during inspection," he snapped. She simply nodded, slipping the phone into her pocket. A crowd had begun to gather beyond the checkpoint, drawn by the confrontation. Some people murmured disapproval. Others craned their necks to see how the scene would end. Tanner, however, seemed to relish the attention. He puffed out his chest as if the small congregation validated his authority. Finally, after another minute of rifling through her bag, Tanner snarled, "You can go, but next time don't dress like you have something to hide." The words dripped with condescension. Adriana's jaw clenched. Dignity bruised, she quietly collected her belongings. Before stepping away, she forced herself to meet his gaze. A flicker of defiance shone in her eyes. Tanner scoffed, unaffected, or so it seemed. But as Adriana turned her back, her heart thundered in her chest. She had never been spoken to like that in an airport, let alone in such a public way. Although her instinct was to keep the peace, a storm brewed in her mind. The humiliating moment refused to dissolve, and in a corner of her heart she realized Gregory would not be pleased when he found out. Adriana made her way toward the departure gates, still reeling from the encounter. Despite her profession as a cultural liaison who traveled frequently, she often worked alongside nonprofits and global organizations fostering cross-cultural understanding. This was one of the few times she had been so blatantly disrespected. She had endured microaggressions before, but this incident took it to another level. She paused near a window overlooking the runway to collect her thoughts. Outside, aircrafts from various airlines taxied on the tarmac, their engines roaring in the distance. The magnitude of John F. Kennedy International Airport lay before her, bustling with the promise of journeys both near and far. Usually the sight would spark an appreciative thrill in Adriana's heart. Today it was overshadowed by the sting of Tanner's words. She pulled out her phone and read the text message Gregory had sent. "Hey, sweetheart, just checking in. I'm already at the Monarch Lounge. Let me know if you need anything." Adriana hesitated. Should she tell him what happened? She didn't want to turn their meeting into a confrontation, yet she also felt a simmering anger that refused to be quieted. Realizing Gregory was only a short walk away, she decided to head to the lounge. Monarch Airlines maintained an exclusive lounge at JFK, an oasis of calm amid the chaos of the airport, accessible to first-class passengers and VIPs. The entrance was discreet, near Gate 21. Adriana swiped her membership card, a perk of her husband's role, and the door slid open. Inside was a world of plush velvet chairs, gentle lighting, and staff members gliding gracefully with trays of refreshments. The mild scent of fresh coffee perfumed the air. Gregory Carter stood near a tall window, phone in hand, flipping through some messages. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and an earnest smile, he exuded an air of quiet confidence. On more than one occasion, someone had told Adriana that Gregory was the kind of man whose presence lit up a room. She couldn't help but smile, even through her lingering frustration. When he saw her, his face brightened instantly. "Audrey, there you are," he said, placing his phone aside and pulling her into a gentle hug. She lingered in his embrace for a moment, letting the warmth steady her. "I'm here," she replied softly, but Gregory sensed the tension in her posture. "What's wrong?" he asked, eyes flicking to her face in concern. Adriana sighed and tried to convey the events that transpired without letting her voice quiver. She spoke quietly, aware of a few curious glances from the lounge staff. "There was an incident at security," she said, carefully recounting how the metal detector beeped, how Officer Tanner made suspicious remarks and ultimately insulted her. Gregory's expression hardened with each word, his jaw setting in a tight line. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm so sorry you went through that. No one should have to endure such treatment." His eyes flickered with anger, but he kept his voice even. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded, though tears threatened to surface. "I'm upset, but I'm okay. I just don't want this to escalate." Gregory exhaled, frustration simmering behind his eyes. "Unfortunately, this can't go unaddressed. That officer has no right to speak to anyone like that, least of all you. I might have to pull a few strings." Adriana tensed. "Greg, I know you want to help, but I don't want a huge scene. You know how it looks when someone with power tries to throw their weight around." He gave her a gentle smile. "I won't make a spectacle out of it, but there are protocols in place for officer misconduct. And I do have some influence in the airport's administrative board, especially since Monarch partnered with the Port Authority for expansions last year." The mention of the real-life Port Authority of New York and New Jersey grounded the situation in reality, highlighting the complexities behind large-scale airport operations. Adriana hesitated, then gave him a small nod. She trusted Gregory, and she trusted his judgment. If he could use his position to address the wrongdoing quietly, she was open to it. "Just promise me you won't blow up," she said, half smiling. He pressed her hand gently. "I promise." The next few hours passed in a blur. Adriana tried to shake off the encounter, distracting herself with a stack of documents related to her upcoming conference in London. Gregory made phone calls, politely but firmly requesting a private meeting with the head of airport security. Meanwhile, the lounge staff, oblivious to the underlying tension, went about their duties, offering them pastries and cappuccinos. Adriana sipped hers slowly, the warm drink soothing her troubled mind. When their flight was finally announced, they left the lounge and proceeded to the gate. Passengers around them were oblivious to the earlier drama. Only a few recognized Gregory as the CEO of Monarch Airlines, and he gave them polite nods. Adriana took a seat near the window in first class, gazing at the swirl of activity on the runway below. The hum of the aircraft's engine enveloped her in a soothing lull. Yet she couldn't completely relax. Every so often, Tanner's sneer and his insulting words replayed in her mind. The memory felt like a bruise that refused to heal. She glanced over at Gregory, who was scribbling notes in a leather notebook. He caught her eye and gave an encouraging smile. That was enough for now. Little did she realize that the wheels of fate were already spinning. Gregory's discreet phone calls had set in motion an inquiry that would bring Officer Tanner's actions to light. In the days to come, the matter would escalate beyond anything she could have imagined, and for Officer Tanner, the consequences would be more than he ever bargained for. For the moment, the airplane took off smoothly, engines roaring, lifting them into the sky above New York. Adriana pressed her head back into the seat, letting her eyes drift shut. She didn't want revenge, only justice and respect. But as the clouds swallowed the plane, she sensed that this was far from over. Landing at Heathrow Airport in London, Adriana felt the need to compartmentalize her recent experience and focus on her work. She was scheduled to speak at a conference about strengthening cultural ties between American and European charities. The day of travel had already taken a toll on her emotional energy, but she knew how to put on a brave face when necessary. The immaculate halls of the conference venue, lined with promotional banners and bustling attendees, reminded her of the work she loved, bridging communities through conversation and shared goals. Gregory, meanwhile, had arranged for a suite at a nearby hotel. After the first day of the conference, Adriana returned there, drained but satisfied with her presentation. Gregory was in the sitting area, laptop open, absorbed in an email chain. He glanced up when she entered. "You look exhausted," he said softly. She simply nodded, dropping onto a plush armchair. As she kicked off her heels, Gregory set his laptop aside. "Listen, I don't want to disrupt your focus, but there have been developments regarding Officer Tanner." Her spine stiffened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Tell me." Gregory folded his hands. "I spoke with the head of airport security in New York. They're conducting an internal review. Apparently, Tanner has had several complaints filed against him in the past. Nothing quite so explicitly racist, but multiple allegations of harassment." Adriana's lips thinned. She wasn't entirely surprised. She also felt a pang of sorrow, realizing she wasn't alone. Others had endured this man's hostility. "So what happens next?" she asked, voice subdued. Gregory sighed, leaning forward. "They'll likely interview you as part of the investigation. I know you didn't want the spotlight, but it might be necessary to give your account if we want to see real change. Otherwise, he'll just get another warning and continue this behavior." A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in Adriana's stomach. On one hand, she wanted justice. On the other, she dreaded the public scrutiny that might follow. She swallowed hard. "If it helps stop him from harming others, I'll do it," she said finally. Gregory nodded, relief evident in his eyes. "We'll handle it together. I promise I won't let you face this alone." The next morning, Adriana received an email from the airport's HR department requesting a statement about the incident. She spent a long moment at her laptop, carefully typing every detail she could recall, her heart pounding with each word as she relived the officer's cold expression and the humiliating pat-down. She paused several times, taking steadying breaths, ensuring she chose her words precisely. By the time she hit send, her hands felt clammy, yet she also sensed a small weight lifting from her shoulders. She glanced at Gregory across the room. He was on a conference call, but he gave her a thumbs up when he saw her expression. That evening, after a long day of conference workshops and networking, Adriana found a quiet corner on the hotel's terrace. It overlooked the Thames, the water shimmering under the London skyline's lights. She took a moment to reflect on the whirlwind of emotions. She wanted to believe in a system that would hold Officer Tanner accountable. But a creeping doubt told her the outcome might not be so simple. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a friend back home in New York, someone who worked in local media. "Hey, Adriana, is everything okay? Heard rumors about an incident at JFK? Call me when you can." Adriana's heart lurched. Somehow the story was leaking beyond the confines of an internal investigation. Anxiety gnawed at her. She toyed with the phone in her hand, unsure whether to respond right away. A gentle breeze ruffled her hair. She inhaled, letting the crisp air soothe her nerves. The world was so vast, filled with so many complexities. Here she was in London, about to address hundreds of people on how to cultivate understanding across cultures. And back home, she was entangled in a conflict that centered on racism and abuse of power. The very opposite of what she advocated for. Suddenly, Gregory stepped onto the terrace, phone in hand. The concern etched on his face was evident. "There's been a development," he said. "Officer Tanner filed a counter-complaint, claiming you were uncooperative and posed a security risk." Adriana's eyes widened in shock and anger. "What?" Gregory gently clasped her shoulder. "Don't worry. They have footage that will prove otherwise, but it shows that Tanner is ready to fight back." He paused, scanning her face. "We need to be prepared." Her mind raced. The idea that Tanner was doubling down on his false accusations ignited both fury and fear. She shook her head in disbelief. "This is exactly what I was worried about, my name being dragged through the mud." Gregory's expression softened. "You're not alone. I've arranged a meeting with legal counsel. The airline's legal team has also stepped in. They're on our side. We'll get this sorted. Adriana nodded, trying to find a foothold of calm. She had to remind herself that they had solid evidence on their side. Security camera footage, the female officer's testimony, and the statements of bystanders. And the truth. That should be enough, right? Yet she couldn't ignore the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. In the weeks that followed, Adriana and Gregory continued their work in London while exchanging countless emails and phone calls with legal teams back home. The distance made it both easier. She was spared the local media frenzy, and harder. She felt disconnected from the situation that directly impacted her sense of safety. Each time a new email arrived or the phone rang late at night, anxiety spiked in her chest. During the final day of the conference, Adriana gave a heartfelt closing speech on empathy and global citizenship. She spoke passionately about the need to see one another's humanity, no matter our differences. When she concluded, applause thundered throughout the auditorium. Yet she found herself holding back tears, wishing such understanding existed at every airport security checkpoint. Despite the professional success and the standing ovation, she longed to go home and resolve the matter that loomed over her life like a dark cloud. The final leg of their stay in London ended with a formal dinner among the conference organizers. Gregory, usually the calm one, seemed on edge the entire evening, checking his phone every few minutes. Adriana couldn't help but sense that something big was happening behind the scenes. By the time they boarded the flight back to New York, the tension between them hung thick. Adriana's mind replayed various scenarios, confronting Tanner again, facing the press, possibly enduring public backlash. The airplane's hum lulled her into a restless sleep filled with uneasy dreams. In just a few hours, they'd be back on American soil, where the fallout from Tanner's accusations and the truth of Adriana's own account awaited them. She clenched her fists, resolving to stand firm. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about justice and the countless people who had been mistreated by those sworn to protect them. Touching down at JFK felt surreal. Adriana gazed out the airplane window, watching the sprawl of the city rise to meet them. She braced herself for whatever storm lay ahead. Gregory squeezed her hand as the plane taxied to the gate. His eyes, warm and reassuring, communicated silent support. In the terminal, they were greeted by a Monarch Airlines representative who whisked them into a private corridor, rather than guiding them through the main passenger exit. Adriana quickly understood why. A cluster of reporters had gathered in the arrivals area. It seemed that word had reached local media that something involving a high-profile figure from Monarch Airlines was unfolding. Camera crews, microphones, and bright lights glinted from behind the tinted glass. Adriana felt her pulse spike. "Let's get you home safely," the representative said, gesturing them onward. They took a winding path through staff-only hallways until they reached the baggage claim area, bypassing the throng of journalists. Despite being spared that immediate confrontation, Adriana's nerves buzzed with the realization of how big this had become. Once inside their awaiting car, Gregory exhaled, leaning back in his seat. "I didn't think it would escalate so quickly. But apparently, once the Port Authority started investigating Tanner, some employees leaked details to the press." Adriana sank against the seat cushion, staring at the passing cityscape. New York's towering skyline glowed with possibility, but all she felt was an undercurrent of dread. "Maybe I can give a statement," she said quietly, "just to clarify the situation and stand up for myself." Gregory studied her, eyebrows pinched in concern. "If you're comfortable with that, we can arrange an interview with a reputable outlet. We just need to make sure it doesn't turn into a media circus. Tanner's people are spinning this as if you were belligerent. You and I both know that's not true, and there's camera footage, but rumor mills don't need facts." Adriana nodded, hugging her purse tight. She wanted the truth to come out, every humiliating detail, so people would understand the toxic abuse of power. Yet the idea of giving a public statement filled her with anxiety. Still, she sensed it might be a necessary step. At home, a spacious Manhattan apartment overlooking Central Park, she tried to decompress. The next morning, they met with the legal counsel from Monarch Airlines, who were alarmed by the severity of the counter-complaint filed by Tanner. The lawyers explained the steps: depositions, reviewing footage, interviews with witnesses, and possibly a public statement if the matter went to court. Adriana felt a fresh wave of stress wash over her. "This is bigger than just a single officer at this point," one lawyer said. "If it's proven that the airport security system overlooked or covered up prior complaints, there could be broader implications." While the legal conversation continued, Adriana's phone vibrated. She looked down at the caller ID, Samantha Reed, an old college friend who now worked as a journalist for a local news channel. Adriana hesitated but stepped out to take the call. Samantha's voice was gentle yet urgent. "I'm so sorry this is happening to you," Samantha said. "I'd like to offer you a safe platform to share your story, unfiltered. Our network is reputable and we can avoid sensationalizing it. You'd have editorial input." Adriana felt a surge of gratitude. This might be the opportunity she needed to speak her truth without sensational headlines. "Thank you, Sam," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm considering it. Let me talk to my team and I'll let you know." Before the day was out, word arrived that the airport security management had suspended Tanner while the investigation proceeded. This small development offered a glimmer of hope. At least for the time being, he wouldn't be able to mistreat anyone else. But it also meant he might become more desperate to protect himself, possibly by fueling the narrative that Adriana had been difficult. The next couple of weeks were a flurry of behind-the-scenes negotiations. Adriana handed over her account in detail to the Port Authority's internal review committee, who assured her they would handle the case fairly. Gregory used his influence to ensure that any evidence, security footage, co-worker testimonies, was made available. Yet he was careful to remain transparent and not come across as if he was rigging the process. One evening, while reviewing documents with Gregory in their living room, Adriana found herself unraveling into a spiral of doubt. What if the public sides with him? What if they say I'm playing the race card? Or that this is some kind of power play because we own the airline? Gregory set his pen down, eyes full of compassion. "All we can do is tell the truth. And we have plenty of evidence. You can't control people's prejudices, but you can stand up for yourself. Remember why you do the work you do. It's all about fostering real understanding, right?" His words calmed her, reminding her of the bigger picture. But the sense of foreboding remained. The final straw arrived in the form of a letter from Tanner's attorney, an aggressive demand for an apology from Adriana, claiming that she had defamed the officer's character. Fury ignited within her. She marched into Gregory's study, letter in hand. "They want an apology from me," she exclaimed, voice trembling with indignation. "After he humiliated me and countless others?" Gregory rose from his desk, placing his hands on her shoulders. "This is a scare tactic. They want you to back down, but we won't." Something in Adriana snapped into focus at that moment. She'd spent weeks reeling in fear, but this was the last straw. "I won't give in," she said, voice clear as a bell. "I'm going to speak out. Sam offered me an interview on her program. I'm going to do it." And just like that, the path forward crystallized. Adriana would share her story publicly, ensuring no twisted version would overshadow the truth. The next day, she confirmed with Samantha she'd appear on the Sunday evening broadcast, a primetime slot with a substantial viewership. Her heart pounded with both terror and resolve. When the day arrived, Adriana walked into the studio wearing a tailored navy blue dress. She was escorted to a simple set, a pair of chairs facing each other under bright studio lights. Samantha greeted her warmly, microphone pinned to her lapel. As the countdown began, Adriana took a steadying breath. This interview would change her life. Whether for better or worse, she wasn't sure. But she knew she had to do it. For herself, for the truth, and for everyone who had been silenced by those in power. She straightened her shoulders, determined to see it through. And as the camera's red light blinked on, Samantha turned to her with compassion in her eyes. Adriana, thank you for being here. Can you tell us what happened at JFK? So began a conversation that would ripple far beyond the studio, setting the stage for a confrontation that no one could have predicted. The interview with Samantha aired that Sunday evening, and it quickly became a topic of conversation across social media platforms, from Twitter to Facebook. The hashtag #StandWithAdriana trended locally in New York, drawing both supporters and skeptics. In a calm but firm tone, Adriana had recounted the events at the airport checkpoint, the beep at the metal detector, the humiliating pat-down, and Tanner's condescending remarks that singled her out. She didn't sensationalize or overdramatize. She simply shared the facts. Samantha, true to her word, allowed Adriana to speak uninterrupted. They displayed the surveillance footage that showed Adriana calmly following instructions while Tanner towered over her with a sneer. There was no voice recording, but the body language spoke volumes. Adriana's final words during the interview echoed in viewers' minds. "I am not looking for revenge. I'm looking for accountability." In the days that followed, messages poured in, some supportive, some hateful. People who had experienced similar mistreatment came forward, thanking Adriana for her courage. Others accused her of using her husband's wealth and status to destroy a hard-working officer's career. The latter comment stung, but Adriana tried to focus on the fact that she had at least sparked a dialogue. Meanwhile, the airport's internal investigation continued. Gregory received word from an ally within the administrative board. They had uncovered multiple witness statements corroborating that Tanner regularly targeted travelers of color. His record showed a disproportionate number of extra screenings for Black and Hispanic passengers. Still, the official decision on Tanner's fate had yet to be announced. Late one afternoon, Adriana received a phone call from a woman identifying herself as Officer Chloe Ramirez. Chloe explained she was the female officer who had administered Adriana's pat-down. She sounded nervous, her voice trembling. "I just want to say I'm so sorry," Chloe said. "I saw how he treated you, but I was afraid to speak up. I can't sleep well knowing what happened." Adriana's eyes welled with tears. "I appreciate you reaching out," she replied gently. "I understand how intimidating it must be, especially if you're worried about your job." There was a pause on the line, then Chloe spoke again. "I gave a statement to our supervisors, telling them what I saw. Tanner's done this before. He's singled out people just because he thinks they look suspicious. He uses that phrase, 'you people,' a lot. I hope it helps." Emotions swirled in Adriana's chest. Gratitude, relief, and a lingering sadness that Chloe had felt too scared to speak up until now. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling a surge of hope that maybe justice would prevail. Yet, despite the mounting evidence against Tanner, the process dragged on. Bureaucratic red tape meant that each complaint was carefully reviewed, each claim cross-referenced. Meanwhile, public discourse intensified. News pundits debated the fine line between ensuring security and abusing authority. Some voices insisted that the mention of race overshadowed the bigger concern of national security. Others argued that any abuse, especially racially motivated, should be met with zero tolerance. In the midst of this whirlwind, Gregory received a cryptic phone call one evening. It was from Tanner himself. The officer's tone was unsettlingly calm, as if trying to feign cordiality. "I think we need to talk," he said. "We can put an end to this fiasco quietly, if you're willing to be reasonable." Gregory stiffened. "What do you propose?" he asked, though his voice was clipped with annoyance. Tanner let out a small chuckle. "You can drop your complaint. Publicly state there was a misunderstanding, that my remarks were taken out of context. Then I can withdraw my counter-complaint. No one has to lose face. You own the airline. What do you need with going after me? People might start thinking you and your wife are out of touch with real Americans." Gregory's hand balled into a fist. "Let me be crystal clear," he said, voice trembling with contained anger. "This isn't about face. It's about right and wrong. You humiliated my wife. You've likely done the same to countless others. We're not interested in letting this slide. Tanner's facade cracked for a moment, and his voice dropped to a menacing snarl. If you think you can hide behind money and power, you're mistaken. This country doesn't revolve around you. I'll make sure your precious airline feels the heat. Gregory didn't flinch. Good luck with that, he replied, ending the call. A chill ran down his spine, though. Tanner sounded unhinged, determined to escalate. Could he actually harm the airline, or was it just bluster? He relayed the conversation to Adriana, who felt a surge of nausea. The idea that Tanner might retaliate against innocent passengers or employees at Monarch was terrifying. Gregory assured her that they'd increase security measures and alert the authorities to Tanner's threat. Days passed, and tension mounted like a coiled spring. Adriana continued to receive messages of support, including from civil rights organizations who praised her courage. She also endured vitriol from trolls accusing her of playing the victim. Still, she remained steadfast. She'd come too far to back down now. Then, the day of the final hearing before the Port Authority panel arrived. Adriana and Gregory were asked to appear in person, along with Tanner and his counsel. The hearing would review evidence, testimonies, and ultimately decide whether the officer would be terminated, disciplined, or exonerated. Adriana dressed carefully that morning in a white blouse and black trousers, hair pulled back in a neat bun. Gregory accompanied her in a tailored navy suit. They traveled to the Port Authority's administrative building, a nondescript structure near the airport, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Officer Ramirez and several other witnesses were also summoned. The hearing took place in a small conference room. Adriana sat at a long wooden table opposite Tanner, who wore his uniform as if it were a suit of armor. His eyes glinted with defiance. His lawyer, an older man with a pinched expression, rifled through papers. Meanwhile, the Port Authority officials maintained stern neutrality, prepared to weigh the evidence. First came the statements. Adriana spoke of her experience, carefully recounting every detail. Chloe Ramirez backed her up, recounting how she had seen Tanner single out Adriana and overheard his insulting remarks. Then came the security footage, silent but damning, displayed on a monitor. It showed precisely the moment where Adriana posed no threat, yet Tanner's demeanor was hostile. Tanner's lawyer tried to spin the footage, pointing out that Adriana had declined a call on her phone mid-inspection, implying she was hiding something. The argument seemed flimsy, and the panel members raised skeptical eyebrows. When it was Tanner's turn to speak, he delivered a half-hearted explanation about heightened vigilance and denied ever using racist language. His voice dripped with righteous indignation. Gregory, seated next to Adriana, had to contain himself from retorting. He kept his composure, letting the evidence and witness testimonies speak for themselves. Still, the tension in the room felt electric. As the final arguments concluded, the panel asked everyone to wait outside while they deliberated. Adriana's heart thundered in her chest. She clutched Gregory's hand, glancing at the others in the hallway. Officer Ramirez, a couple of union representatives, and Tanner, who paced like a restless lion. The minutes dragged on with torturous slowness. At last, the door opened, and one of the officials beckoned them back in. With solemn expressions, the panel announced their decision. They cited the testimony of Officer Ramirez, the footage, and the pattern of complaints in Tanner's record. They found him guilty of misconduct and recommended immediate termination. Furthermore, they referred the case for possible criminal investigation into civil rights violations. A subdued hush fell over the room. Adriana inhaled sharply, relief and disbelief flooding her system. Tanner's eyes flashed with fury. He lunged forward as if to protest, but his lawyer held him back. The panel chairperson continued, "Officer Tanner, you have the right to appeal, but effectively your service is terminated as of today." In that instant, Adriana felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Justice had been served, at least for this one incident. The tension that had coiled in her chest for weeks began to unravel. She squeezed Gregory's hand in gratitude. But the ordeal wasn't quite over. The possibility of a civil rights case and any further retaliation still loomed. Yet at least in this hearing, truth prevailed. Outside, reporters clamored for a statement. Adriana stepped up to the microphone, voice steady. I never wanted this to become a spectacle, but I'm relieved the panel saw the truth. My hope is that we all learn from this, that accountability is possible, and that no one is above it. I'm grateful to those who stood by me. Flashes of cameras blinded her. Gregory placed a protective hand on her back. Through it all, she held on to her composure, reminding herself that this moment was bigger than her alone. It was a stand against prejudice, and a stand for basic human decency. Yet, unknown to Adriana, a final twist still lurked on the horizon, one that would test her resolve like never before. 2 days after the hearing, Adriana tried to settle back into her routine. She visited the Monarch Airlines headquarters, a sleek high-rise in Midtown Manhattan, to discuss upcoming marketing campaigns with Gregory and his team. They wanted to emphasize the airline's commitment to diversity and inclusion, a message that felt all the more pertinent in light of recent events. A sense of cautious optimism filled the building's corridors. Many employees had followed Adriana's story, rooting for her quietly. As she passed by, staff members offered discreet smiles or encouraging nods. Though she appreciated their support, she still felt a slight tremor of unease. Tanner had threatened retaliation, and she couldn't entirely banish that from her mind. That afternoon, Gregory's executive assistant rushed into his office, breathless. "Sir, we've received a bomb threat," she said, voice trembling. "It was sent via email to our customer service account. The sender claims to have placed an explosive on a Monarch Airlines plane departing JFK tomorrow." A shock wave of fear rippled through the room. Adriana's heart pounded so fiercely she thought it might echo in her ears. Gregory stood up, expression grim, and immediately instructed his team to alert airport security and the authorities. They had protocols for such threats. Unfortunately, not an uncommon occurrence in the airline industry. But this time the timing felt sinister, and Adriana's mind snapped to Officer Tanner's final words. "I'll make sure your precious airline feels the heat." Law enforcement and airport authorities reacted swiftly, running security sweeps of the targeted plane. They found no device, which often indicated a hoax threat, but it didn't ease the tension. The question loomed. Who sent the threat and why? Gregory filed an official report and the FBI got involved. Adriana spent a sleepless night imagining worst-case scenarios, though she tried to remind herself that no solid evidence tied Tanner to the threat. News of the bomb threat leaked to the press, and once again, Monarch Airlines found itself in headlines. The mention of Adriana's confrontation with Tanner lingered in the background of these stories, fueling speculation. Anxiety built around potential copycats. The next few days were filled with heightened security measures, every suspicious piece of luggage or unusual passenger behavior reported in meticulous detail. Throughout it all, Adriana tried to remain strong. She threw herself into her advocacy work, contacting nonprofits and civil rights groups to share resources on handling discriminatory situations. She even recorded a short video message posted on Monarch Airlines social media, reassuring travelers about their commitment to safety and respect. The clip went viral, with many praising her courage in the face of intimidation. Yet the tension refused to subside entirely. Late one evening, Adriana was alone in the apartment when the doorbell rang. Gregory was still at the office, tied up in meetings with security consultants. Adriana glanced at the clock, nearly 9 p.m. She approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole. A delivery person stood in the hallway, but his baseball cap cast a shadow over his features. Heart thudding, she opened the door slightly, chain still in place. "Delivery for Adriana Carter," he said in a monotone voice. "Need a signature." Adriana's eyebrows knit in confusion. She wasn't expecting any deliveries. "From who?" she asked, voice uncertain. He shrugged, stepping back to reveal a medium-sized package. No name, just an address. The uneasy feeling in her gut multiplied. She unlatched the chain and took the parcel into the apartment. The delivery man walked away without another word. Carefully, Adriana placed the box on the dining table. She stared at it, her instincts on high alert. When she called Gregory, He advised her to contact the authorities if something seemed suspicious. Instead, she used a letter opener to carefully slice through the packing tape. Her nerves were on edge, half expecting something horrifying. Inside, she found layers of bubble wrap. Slowly, she peeled them back. Finally, she uncovered the item. A thick black hardcover journal. No note, no name. Perplexed, she flipped it open. The first pages appeared blank. She skimmed further, breath catching when she saw the words scrawled on page after page. Rambling, hate-filled notes about people of color. Threats, references to cleaning up the system. The content was vile, riddled with racist slurs. A cold sweat broke out on Adriana's skin. She flipped more pages, each one worse than the last. Then near the end she saw repeated references to making them pay, and a scrawled reference to wealthy scum who think they can buy respect. Her chest tightened. Was this from Tanner, or someone else entirely? Could it be a copycat? It was too detailed, too personal, referencing the exact date of her confrontation at the airport. She scrambled for her phone, hands shaking as she called Gregory. "I just received this disturbing journal," she whispered, voice quivering. She tried to stay coherent, describing what she'd found. Gregory's alarm was palpable. "Lock the door," he instructed. "I'm calling the police. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Adriana sank onto the couch, breathing in shallow gasps, her eyes trained on the menacing object lying on the table. The words scrawled across the pages glared back at her, an echo of the hatred she had endured that day at the airport. What if Tanner wasn't working alone? Could someone else have taken up this vendetta against her? Within minutes, the police arrived, as did Gregory. They bagged the journal as evidence, dusting the box for prints. Adriana answered questions, though her mind felt foggy with dread. The officers promised to follow up. As they left, Gregory wrapped his arms around her, a shudder running through him too. Neither voiced it, but the implication hovered between them. This was far from over. Whatever final stand they had to make, it was coming. Adriana could feel it. A last confrontation. A moment where the truth would either shine or be swallowed by darkness. She steadied herself, determined not to let fear overshadow her quest for justice. Despite the recent threats and the unsettling discovery of that hate-filled journal, Adriana resolved not to be cowed. She believed that cowering in the shadows would only embolden whoever was behind these actions. Instead, she strengthened her support network, checking in regularly with civil rights advocates, maintaining open communication with law enforcement, and leaning on Gregory more than ever. Life forged ahead. Gregory launched a new diversity initiative at Monarch Airlines, a robust plan to mentor employees from underrepresented communities and emphasize equity in hiring practices. The couple appeared together at a media event to announce the initiative, and while the mood was generally positive, Adriana couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching her from unseen corners. One chilly autumn afternoon, Adriana was scheduled to visit JFK Airport again, this time for a meeting with the airport's community relations team. They wanted her input on improving passenger experience, especially for travelers from marginalized backgrounds. It was an attempt to turn her painful experience into constructive change. Even so, she felt her pulse quicken as she walked through the familiar terminals. Memories of that humiliating day with Officer Tanner haunted her. The meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the runway. Representatives from the Port Authority, airline executives, and non-profit leaders sat around a long table. Adriana found herself speaking about the importance of training security staff to recognize unconscious bias, to handle screenings with dignity, and to address passenger concerns without hostility. Heads nodded in agreement, and she felt a surge of hope. Amid the discussion, her phone buzzed. She glanced down, intending to ignore it, but the caller ID read private number. A shiver passed through her. She excused herself politely and stepped into the corridor. "Hello?" she answered, her voice hesitant. A chilling laugh echoed on the other end. She recognized the voice instantly. Tanner. "You think you've won, don't you?" he hissed, "parading around with your committees and your fancy husband's money. But it's not over." Adriana's stomach lurched. "What do you want?" She managed, her throat tight. "I want you to know fear," he snarled. "And I want you to back off your little crusade, because if you don't, there'll be consequences. Real ones." The line went dead. Adriana's heart pounded as she stared at the phone, sweat dampening her palms. She leaned against the wall, attempting to compose herself. She debated calling security right then, but she wanted to finish the meeting. She decided to text Gregory. "Tanner just called. Threatened me again. We'll call you after the meeting." She slipped back into the conference room, determined not to let Tanner's menacing words disrupt her progress. She forced a bright smile, continuing to discuss policy improvements. Yet she couldn't ignore the adrenaline coursing through her veins. After the meeting ended, she nearly ran to her car. On the way, she dialed Gregory, recounting the phone call in a breathless rush. "He's gone too far," Gregory fumed. "He's not only breaking the law by harassing you, but he's violating the terms of his termination. Let's coordinate with the police and see what can be done immediately." Adriana nodded, starting the engine. "I'll meet you at home." She hung up, checking her mirrors instinctively. Her eyes scanned the parking structure for any suspicious figures. The entire drive home, she felt pinned by the sensation of being watched. That evening, the couple sat with a detective from the NYPD who specialized in cybercrimes and harassment. They provided the details of Tanner's call, as well as the hateful journal delivered days earlier. The detective took meticulous notes. "We'll file a restraining order request," she said. "Given Tanner's history and these new threats, it shouldn't be hard to obtain." Adriana nodded, grateful but still uneasy. Would a piece of paper stop a man who had already shown a willingness to break rules? She tried to remind herself that law enforcement was on her side now, that she wasn't alone. The next morning, she woke to a flurry of phone notifications. Gregory, who had been up early, rushed into the bedroom, phone in hand. His expression was tight with anxiety. "Adriana, turn on the news." She scrambled for the remote, flipping to a local station. The screen showed aerial footage of a house in flames. The anchor's voice was urgent. "We're getting reports that Officer Tanner's residence was discovered on fire early this morning. Authorities are investigating the cause. Tanner himself was seen fleeing the scene according to witnesses. His whereabouts are currently unknown." A swirl of emotions tangled within Adriana. Shock, disbelief, a flicker of relief that no one was reported hurt, and a rising sense of dread. Gregory spoke quietly. "If he's on the run, there's no telling what he might do next." They spent the day in a haze of worry, checking updates, calling friends and law enforcement for information. By evening, rumors circulated that Tanner had skipped town, possibly heading south. The official statements were vague. He was considered a person of interest in the arson, but not officially charged yet. The sense of a looming threat weighed heavily, an invisible presence in every room. A week passed without any sightings. Adriana tried to resume normal life. She immersed herself in philanthropic work, attended meetings for the new Monarch Airlines program, and tried to find comfort in small routines. Morning coffee with Gregory, a jog through Central Park. Slowly, the tension seemed to ease, as if Tanner had vanished into thin air. One afternoon, Adriana ventured to a cafe near her apartment for a meeting with a nonprofit organizer. She sat by the window, scrolling through notes on her phone. The cafe was lightly filled, jazz music playing overhead, the hiss of an espresso machine behind the counter. She almost felt at peace. Then, in the reflection of the window, she saw him. A figure standing across the street, partially hidden behind a mailbox. Her breath caught in her throat. The man wore a baseball cap pulled low, but the shape of his jaw, the set of his shoulders, she recognized them instantly. Tanner. Her pulse thundered, and she fought the instinct to panic. She slid her phone across the table and typed a quick text to Gregory. "He's here, outside the cafe." Then, trying to remain calm, she lifted her coffee cup to her lips, watching the reflection. Tanner seemed to be watching her, waiting, For what? Suddenly, he moved. He crossed the street with purposeful strides. Adriana's heart beat so loudly she was sure the patrons around her could hear it. She rose from her chair, scanning for an exit route, but the front door was the only way out. Tanner burst in, eyes wild, face contorted with rage. "You ruined my life," he snarled, voice echoing through the cafe. Customers froze, eyes wide with alarm. Adriana stumbled backward, adrenaline screaming in her veins. The barista behind the counter started to dial 911. Tanner advanced, fists clenched. "You had to make it a race thing, didn't you? You just couldn't leave well enough alone." His entire body shook with fury. Adriana's mind raced. Should she run or try to talk him down? Fear and resolve warred within her. She raised her hands in a gesture of surrender. "Tanner, please, think about what you're doing." A twisted laugh erupted from him. "Don't pretend you care. You want me locked up, you and your fancy husband." Spittle flecked his lips. A wave of panic took hold of Adriana. The entire cafe looked on in shock, some filming with their phones. Sirens wailed in the distance. Tanner heard them, his eyes flashing. For a moment, he glanced around like a caged animal. Then he lunged at Adriana, grabbing her arm. She let out a sharp cry, struggling to pull free. Before he could do more, an off-duty security guard tackled Tanner to the ground, pinning him. Tanner screamed and thrashed, but he was no match for the guard's strength. Police officers burst through the door moments later, guns drawn. They cuffed Tanner, who bellowed incoherent threats as they hauled him outside. Adriana stumbled into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. Tears flooded her eyes, not just from terror, but also from a strange sense of release, like a tension coil in her soul had finally snapped. Outside, red and blue lights reflected off the cafe windows, a chaotic swirl of color. Gregory arrived moments later, breathless. He rushed to Adriana, enveloping her in a fierce hug. She sobbed into his chest, both relief and fear coursing through her. But as the handcuffed Tanner was shoved into a squad car, a final wave of calm washed over her. Maybe now, at long last, this nightmare would truly end. In the aftermath, Adriana found herself changed. She'd faced racism, abuse of power, and threats on her life. Yet she emerged stronger, committed to ensuring no one else had to endure what she had. Tanner faced charges of assault, harassment, and potential hate crimes, and was ultimately convicted. In the public eye, Adriana became a symbol of resilience and advocacy, demonstrating that speaking out can spark real change. This story reminds us all that silence only serves oppression. By standing up for ourselves and others, we can dismantle systemic injustice, one voice at a time. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found inspiration, or if you believe in what Adriana stands for, please like, share, and subscribe. Help spread this message of justice and equality so that together we can build a world where everyone is treated with the dignity they deserve.